Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here for the second episode of today. Earlier today we discussed Tesla stock hitting $2,000 per share, Panasonic investment in Gigafactory Nevada, and the blackouts going on in California. So make sure you check that episode out if you did miss it, because it is a bit confusing with two episodes today. But I wanted to keep this one separate. As I said earlier, this is the 3-year anniversary for Tesla Daily. I started the podcast back on August 20th, 2017. And last year, on the 2-year anniversary of Tesla Daily, I announced that I would be taking this sort of project thing, whatever this ends up becoming, full time. I like to use the episode on this day to sort of step back from Tesla and check in on what Tesla Daily is, how far we've come, and where things are going from here. I know we have a lot of new listeners this year, so a lot of you probably haven't heard that episode from last year. It gives a lot of the background on the podcast, why it started, and what the goals are. So I'm actually just going to include that episode at the tail end of this episode for those of you that haven't heard it, or maybe for those of you that want to listen again. It's been quite the year. As I talk about in that episode, really the essence of Tesla Daily has always been to get good information out to as many people as possible. And I felt like with just the podcast, searchability and discoverability was so poor that I needed to add something to that so that people could actually find the information. So 9 months ago, launched YouTube. We're now up to 5.5 million views. So I would say mission accomplished on that. The same line of thought went into the decision to launch The Street 3 months ago. And I think from yesterday's episode, we can clearly see the potential for that to further those same goals. That progress has helped facilitate a lot of different things. Notably, we had 4 analysts on the podcast this year. I think that's been helpful for all of us and our understanding, as well as for the analysts and their understanding. And I think as the audience grows and we head into the second year on YouTube, opportunities like that are just going to become more and more available. Hopefully just allowing for that continued permeation of really good information both ways. Last year, I asked for listener support to help make this feasible, and I hope that that support has been rewarded. That is the driving force for me, is to make sure that people that have supported this channel feel like that support has been worth it and that they're actually getting a return on that support, because I try to take that and I try to invest it and I try to turn it into something that comes back even better. And I really hope and I do believe that that has happened this year. I mean, we've added video, we've added writing, the episodes have been more consistent, which is something I mentioned that I really wanted coming out of this full-time move. We've had 237 episodes this year, 30 more than I was able to achieve in year 1 or year 2. So it's 14% more. The episodes have gotten longer, probably 25% longer on average. So putting those together, you're looking at about 40% more just straight audio content before even factoring in the additions of video and writing. I also hope that this has sort of proven a business model that is not predicated on clickbait, but rather on good information. I think throughout the entire year, I've only had maybe a handful of comments accusing me of clickbaiting. And even those I try to take to heart and I try to understand so that I can make things that are not that way, while still making things interesting enough to help spread that good information. And then the last thing I want to mention here is that despite all the new stuff this year, the old stuff, Tesla Daily as a podcast, an audio podcast, has remained. It's been supported, it's improved, and actually the audio-only audience continues to grow and set new records despite the other distribution options. So I'm really proud of being able to expand while still keeping those roots. Anyway, the point here is that there's been a lot of progress over the last year. I hope that that support has been rewarded. And I hope that it demonstrates to people that are maybe on the fence about supporting or have thought about supporting in the past, that that will really help and enable me to build things that will provide a lot of value in return. So as we look ahead to the next year, that is what I want to emphasize the most. We are putting the building blocks in place here for something that I hope can be so much bigger. I have so many ideas. It's just about finding the time, the money, and the people to bring those ideas to reality. And that is what I'm focused on, in addition to continuing to provide as excellent of content as I can. I said last year that I was working 70, 80 hours a week doing the podcast and working full time. Well, taking the podcast full time has not really alleviated that. I'm still working that much, but I think it's been an amazing move for me. I've really, really enjoyed the last year. It's been so fun, so rewarding for me to connect with all of you, and at such a great time with the stock performance for Tesla over the last year. I wish it would have happened under better circumstances worldwide without a pandemic, but hopefully we can continue to return to a little bit more normalcy in 2021. So here's to the year ahead for Tesla Daily, for whatever this ends up becoming. I'm excited about it. I hope you're all excited about it as well. And if you do want to support me on that journey, you can do that at patreon.com/Tesla Daily Podcast. As I said, I'll leave that 2-year episode here at the end if you do want to listen to it. There will be a bit of intro music heading into it. Otherwise, let me know what you guys think for the next year in the comment section. And here is last year's episode. Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, August 20th, 2019 edition of Tesla Daily on Official Tesla Podcast. My name is Rob Maurer. Today is a special episode for me. This is the 2-year anniversary of Tesla Daily and also coincidentally, episode 400 of the podcast. With those milestones in mind, today I wanted to take some time to talk about where the podcast is going. And with that, I actually have a pretty important announcement to make. So we're going to take a brief break from Tesla today. Hope that's all right. Before we get into that, though, I want to talk a little bit about where we've been, because I know not everybody has listened to all 400 of these episodes, and I don't talk about this kind of stuff all that often. So I'll be pretty brief here, but I started this podcast for a couple of reasons. The first and primary goal was to help keep people informed on Tesla due to the massive amounts of misinformation, poor journalism, really just plain inaccurate reporting that I was consistently seeing out there. It was pretty common for me to get texts from friends asking about articles from the New York Times or CNBC, wherever, and then I would have to explain to them missing context or things that simply weren't accurate or that were misinterpreted. And over time, I realized that it probably wasn't just my friends in that situation, because it takes a ton of time to stay well informed on Tesla, and the media simply doesn't do a good job of doing that. So a couple things fell into place, and at some point I realized that, hey, a daily podcast might be a good solution to this. I can help keep people informed with accurate information. So that was the genesis of the idea and a big part of why the podcast is daily, but there was also a personal reason for me too. I talked about this last year on the 1-year episode, but naturally I'm an introverted person, and as such, I had long felt like my speaking ability was one of the bigger things that might hold me back in the future in my career. So far, I had had really good success, but to get where I really wanted to be, I knew that that was something that I would need to improve on. So at the time, I'd been reading a lot about neuroplasticity, probably because of Neuralink, and was really fascinated by the ability of the brain to physically change neural pathways based on repetitive action, which is really just a fancier way of saying that you get better at something with consistent practice, pretty obvious. But for some reason, the physical adjustment to the brain really resonated with me, and I realized that basically my whole life, my brain has been wired for input rather than output, with things like sitting in class, listening, reading, learning. You definitely get speaking opportunities, but they're infrequent. So understanding that my brain could actually rewire itself if I did something every day gave me that motivation to commit to a daily podcast, because every day I would then be practicing presenting. I actually posted about this too on Reddit just a couple months into the podcast. I said that I had 3 goals when starting. Quote, improve my speaking ability to help me advance in my career. This is why I choose to do my podcast daily. Get 1,000 listeners per episode, and generate revenue to offset an unnecessary personal cost I will be taking on soon. End quote. So that personal cost was a Model 3. I've always been super frugal, so no matter how amazing, the thought of buying a new car, let alone a premium car, has always been a struggle for me. So I figured I could justify having a Tesla as long as I had a Tesla podcast that also helped pay for it. Clearly, I haven't had success in doing that yet. I still don't have a Model 3, but that's mostly due to the performance of Tesla stock and my own appetite for risk, as many of you know. Anyway, that's kind of an aside, but over time, the podcast has taken shape and I've largely achieved those goals that I set out to with a ton of hard work and so much awesome support from a really amazing group of listeners. And as those goals have been achieved, it's become time for me to reflect on new goals. So as I said, my career has been incredibly important to me. I've worked super hard to get to where I am. And then on top of that, I've added this podcast, which, even though it ends up being about 8 minutes a day, takes me hours every single day to research, analyze, fact check, ideate, edit, and eventually publish. Between my job and my commute and the podcast, I estimate that I've been working 70 to 80 hours a week for the last 2 years since I started, which is not a complaint. That's been my choice. Many people work more, but I have found that I've made more sacrifices than I probably would like to admit to myself in terms of social life, dating, things like fitness and health. I alluded to this on the podcast a while back, saying that I would have to be a little bit less frequent to make sure that I was giving enough priority to some of those things. But at the same time, I set the expectations as daily, and I hate missing those episodes when I have to. So I've worked myself into a bit of a crossroads here, which then brings me to the announcement. After a tremendous amount of consideration and conversations with parents, family, friends, even ex-girlfriends, it is with extremely mixed emotions that I have made the decision to leave the career that I've been putting my heart into for the last 7 years to focus on my own projects. This podcast is a huge part of that choice, but I'm hopeful that that is just the tip of the iceberg. I definitely want to keep doing this podcast. I'm super excited that this is going to be able to make things more consistent. Sometimes I see the occasional mention of the podcast online and people will say something like, "Oh, check this out, it's great," and mostly daily, which is super fair. But as a perfectionist, that really grates on me because I know how hard it's been to get these 400 episodes out as consistently as I've been able to with the other commitments that I have had. Anyway, this will help with that consistency. And it's also going to open up a lot more time for analysis, especially on the forecasting side of things, which I'm really excited to dive into more, and for things like interviews, which take a lot of time to coordinate and to secure, but are often some of the best episodes. So I really think this is going to improve the content as well as the consistency. But as good as this will be for the podcast, I've realized that podcasting just isn't a great way to spread information. The shareability and searchability of podcasts as a medium are pretty poor right now. There's nothing really funneling traffic here. It's pretty much 100% word of mouth. If the goal is to spread good information, we need content that can do a little bit more. And I want to bring the same rational, authentic, anti-sensational, anti-clickbait mindset that I bring to this podcast every day to a broader audience through different, more effective mediums. I've had these feelings for a long time, and as the media continues to deteriorate, in my opinion, those feelings have only grown stronger. But I can't do that without more time, and unfortunately, I can't get more time without quitting my job. So, the obvious downside here is that I am now losing nearly 90% of my income. Maybe this is naive of me, but I think I have a chance to get out there and make an impact, and I want to take that. But that's uncomfortable, and to be honest, I'm a little bit nervous. I had a good career, and this was a really tough decision for me to make. So what I'm asking for now is support. If you've been on the fence about supporting on Patreon or felt like maybe you should check that page out, now is definitely the time to do it. Now is when I need that support. If you want to help sustain independent media that is about more than just generating clicks, this is your opportunity to do that, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that that support makes a difference. I'm making a big leap here, and I need you to take just a step with me for this to work. Well under 5% of daily listeners support this podcast right now, and I think we can do far better than that. If we can double, I think I'll have the runway to build out these ideas I've got, and I'm confident that there's a lot of value here. We just need to get to that point. So I don't ever push hard for this, but I'm pushing hard today. Please go to patreon.com/Tesla Daily Podcast and consider supporting. All right, back to present day Rob. Thank you for listening. Again, don't forget to subscribe, sign up for notifications. Also, make sure you're following me on Twitter @Tesla Podcast. And I'll see you again tomorrow for the Friday, August 21st episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you so much.